Chevre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark und freilich begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh Pashas Eikev, Chof Aleph Menachem Ov. Since we're still during the Shloshim of Reb Yoel Kahn, my Mashpia, we will still talk about Reb Yoel and what we can learn from him, and why it's very, very important, and how it's very, very relevant to a Chassid. But first, we're going to say a thought for the week, and before that, we'll start as usual with the posuk. We'll start with a posuk from Kapitel Chav Zayin. Yiras Sho'myim Hashem oiso avakesh shifti beveis Hashem kol yemei chayai lachzis b'noim Hashem ulevaker becholei. One thing I ask of Hashem, and that is what I'm seeking: to sit in the house of Hashem all the days of my life, to gaze upon the delight of Hashem, and to spend mornings in His sanctuary. So in a way, you could say this represents Reb Yoel. Hashem, oisa avakesh. Reb Yoel lived for the Rebbe, to be in the presence of the Rebbe, and to always bring nachas to the Rebbe and do what the Rebbe wants. So it doesn't mean necessarily they have to be in 770. If the Rebbe wants shlichus, you understand, like the Rebbe once said, Divus forum weiter is in ein Nenter. Was weiter als Nenter. When somebody understands what the Rebbe wants, what the mission is, so you could be far away physically, and it's still shifty beveis Hashem kol yemei chayai. You're really there, connected and one with the Rebbe. So, as usual, the thought for the week, Daf Leben mit der Zeit, is connected to Parashat Shavua, and I'm going to connect it in two ways. First, we'll start with the posuk, where this is Kapitel Yud Aleph, posuk Chof Beis. It says, Im shomer tishmon es kol ha-mitzvah zeis, asher anechi mitzvah eschem, la'soiso la'avas Hashem keichem, lelechas b'chol drachov, u'ledovka boi. There's one aspect we can talk about, dveikus and talmidei chachamim, but I'm not going to speak about that. I'm going to speak about something very novel that the Rebbe attaches to the concept of lelechas b'chol drachov. What does it mean to go in all His ways? Rashi says, Hu Rachum. It means to go in Hashem's ways. He is merciful. Va'atatei Rachum. You should be merciful. Hu gemel chasodim. He bestows kindness. Va'atatei chasodim. You should bestow kindnesses. There's a letter of the Rebbe in Yiras Kodesh, Krach Tes Vov, Omid Kuf Yud Beis, where the Rebbe takes this idea and translates it in relation to shlichus. And what does it mean to go in His ways? There's another aspect to it. And what is that? Speak like Hashem. And what does it mean to speak like Hashem? That you're as effective. That the words don't just stay words, but they bring results. I'm going to read you the letter inside, because it's very interesting, and it really demands very much from us. The letter says as follows. We could also learn from this, just like Hashem's words never remain just words, but they immediately translate into action. Man has to endeavor. A person should always endeavor that his words should have potency. They should be powerful. They should always bring action. And it's very much dependent on the person who's speaking. Because you're anyways similar to Hashem, that's why you're called Adam. And how is that? The Rebbe mentions two things here. שיהיו דברים יצאים מן הלב, שאז נכנסים אל לב השמע, כמים מנזל לידוע, So first of all, it should be words coming from the heart. So therefore they will enter the heart, as is known. And in your contact, Al Pi Maimer Azal. That's the second thing, according to the Maimer Azal, which is in Mesechtes Brachos, Tavov Beis, which says, Kol Odom, the Rebbe doesn't bring the quote, Kol Odom, Sheyesh Be Yiras Sho'myim, Dvorav Nishmoyin. If you will be one who is a Yiras Sho'myim, your words will be listened to. And the Rebbe learns, not only will the words enter the other person's heart, but the person will listen, obey what you're telling them. And the Rebbe says, so when I saw this letter, it made me think of Reb Yoel, and it made me think of all of us as shluchim, as teachers, educators. And as we know, I mentioned it last week, there's a whole sefer, which is meant that we should study it and learn the principles of how we're going to be more effective in being able to influence in a good way another person. So obviously what comes out from this letter of the Rebbe is it has to come from your heart, and you have to be a Yiras Sho'myim, which means you have to be a role model. But I would like to extrapolate from this letter another point, but it's always obviously connected to the idea of Dvarim HaYetzim min halev. That means the purity of heart. And to be a Yiras Sho'myim really means also to have Bitul. So, what does it mean to speak like Hashem and your words should be effective? And in this way, now we come to Reb Yoel. Reb Yoel was the most influential Chassid. He impacted the most people. As we've spoken about last week, and as we saw, and I will discuss soon, there was a Zoom video that they made at the end of the Shiva. So what I believe to be the main aspect of Reb Yoel that made him so effective is his humility. But what I mean to say is humility, if you just say a Bitul Defied, it's not enough. There's more to it. And I hope I'm not going to be taken wrong. And I'm entering dangerous waters. And I could get into trouble. And the truth be told, I'm really addressing my students. This is what I feel in general in life. I'm talking to my Talmidim. And this is what I believe, and I feel I have an obligation to tell my Talmidim. Those that don't want to accept it, don't have to accept what I'm going to say. But for those that are my Talmidim, this is what I believe, and I feel I have an obligation to tell you. And really, it needs a lot more time to be explained, but I'll try my best. Reb Yoel hat sich nicht Eikev in a ציור. He never put himself into a label. He transcended labels and he defied categorization. He was Chassidus b'tarasa, pure Chassidus. Now, most of us can't afford, are not able to be such a level. What I mean to say is like this. He never preached. He never projected holier than thou. And es קיינמאל given a feiner, schöner, heilige Mensch. Now, most people, let's say a person's in a leadership position, he's a Rav. He's a Rav in a community. Reb Yoel was never in such a position. So he didn't have to put on the garb of a rabbi or a Rav. The same thing is Lagabe Hanhola. He never told the Bocher no, even though he was a member of the Hanhola, and he was a mashpia of Chassidus, but he never really acted in any way, shape, or form as a part of any establishment or authority. So that's an easy way to say it. But the real emek inyan is because he has no agenda, because he's not political, is nicht kein Parteimensch. He doesn't represent any moisid, Merkaz, Machne Yisrael, Tzach, Temchi Temimim, whatever it is. Sometimes when a person's in a leadership position, and there's nothing wrong with that, and each one has their shlichus. But because of that, sometimes das ist shein a gewisse ציור, and therefore something else, which doesn't necessarily go with that ציור, is going to reject or won't be able to receive. But when someone defies all categorizations, all he represents is emes, all he represents is Chassidus, and he has no ego, and he's completely selfless, and he's really humble, so then he has the most effect and the greatest impact. And this is also connected with, obviously, the name of the parsha Eikev, which could be translated as heal. Rashi says, why does the posuk say Eikev tishmiyun? When you will listen, you will get rewarded, because we're talking about the mitzvah sh'adam dash ba'kevav, that the person treads upon with his heel. But the Hatorim says, Hamayrid de Kazachir, which I think humbly might be the source for what all Chassidim know and Chassidus talks about. What does the Hatorim say? Eikev anova lemeid min ha'okev. Learn humility from your heels. Min ha'okev hazeh. Shehilech achar regel derech hanova. Ulefichach einei nigov kamei etzbo yisaraglayim. Unbelievable. Learn humility from this heel that walks behind the foot in a humble way and therefore is not stubbed as are the toes. Your toes stick out, so therefore they get stubbed. Says a shtickle metzias. It's like a part of your foot, aber it's nachal zach. Mashenkin, your heels that are behind, they're the lowest, last thing, total bitul, so therefore they never get in the way and therefore they're never stubbed. So in other words, what the Hatorim is saying over here really, al derech de bewusste Wort, a seichel can sein astira zu der Kavone. Aber in the Piate, as the famous Moshel Chassidus, was steckt man ein heiße Wasser? First, the Piate. What does the person put into the hot water first? The heels. And Chassidus brings this as an analogy, as a moshel from Mesiras Nefesh in the time of Golus. We're a level of heel, but really the purity, Etzam HaNefesh, is revealed more in the heel than in the head. Because the heel is really more of a keli. The Rebbe discusses this very profoundly in the Sikh and Chilik Tes. So in other words, what does it mean? V'hoya Eikev. Amadav Horavin of Zayin Apiate. You have to toil to be like a heel. Be humble. And this is Reb Yoel. The greatest super genius. Hat sich nicht Eikev nach ציור. He was like a heel. He saw himself as a piate. And he worked, if you could say so, really was more natural, to be a piata, a soldier of Afotzas Hamayonis, an instrument of Afotzas Hamayonis, a weapon of Afotzas Hamayonis. And before we speak about Reb Yoel more in particular, I think this also could be connected to what I believe Reb Yoel would have seen as the number one Torah of the Rebbe, which is very, very famous, which epitomizes the avodah of this generation. Everyone knows the famous Maimer L'Tim Shekelu Tavshin Yud Beis, where the Rebbe in that Maimer gives the explanation of why Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, Eini yidei be'ezeh derech melichin osi. He said at the end of his life, he doesn't know where he's going to end up, if he's going to Gan Eden or not. And it's the famous question, how could he ask such a question? And why now, right before he passes away, if he's really worried about doing the right thing, which that's what it means, whether he's ending up in the right place or not, depending upon how he led his life, so why is he worried about it now all of a sudden? Why didn't he think about it till now? So this is a famous question, and Chassidus deals with it, and there was the answer of Chassidus till the Rebbe's Biur. But the Rebbe's Biur was a whole new novel approach, and really the Rebbe was talking about himself. It was a statement about the Rebbe, but this is what he demanded from all of us. The Rebbe sees himself as a shliach, the ultimate shliach. And the ultimate shliach has no time to think about his level. He has no time to think about his rank, because that would be considered a me'ila b'shlichus. Just get on with the job. Do your mission. It's all about the mission, nothing else. And in that Maimer, in other words, Why didn't he think about it till he was about to pass on? Because he didn't have time to think about it. Why? Because he was too busy carrying out the mission. Madreges, Giluyim, that's not important. Who cares if I'm a colonel or if I'm a sergeant or I'm a general? The main thing is the mission. I don't have time to think about the ranks. I have to remember I'm a soldier. And a soldier just knows one thing: carry out his duty. So therefore he didn't have time to think about it. Mashenkin at the end of his life, when he's tired and he's bedridden, so now he could think about actually where is he holding with his nefesh. There's more to it, but I'm keeping it simple. So in the Maimer, everyone knows this famous Maimer of Tafshin Yud Beis, and I'm not going to read you all the words, but one of the most famous lines that everyone knows about it is he's talking about Rebbe Zakai, that he's totally busy and obsessed with carrying out the mission. Weiß nicht, was ist mit seinem Seichel, mit seinen Midis, und verrät mit dem Helm Shebenefesh. He has no idea what's really going on with his faculties. Because when he thinks about the fact that time is limited and every single minute he has to carry out a shlichus, so therefore, if he's going to let 1 minute pass that he's not on the mission, so then that means that he went against the Mishalech. So therefore, if someone's going to ask him what's happening with Artzecha, which means what's going on with your Ratzon, so this is the Lashon that Rebbe said in the Maimer now, Tzoyak b'man nafshoi, Mali Ratzon, Mali Tainug, Mali Ava, Mali Yira. Wenn man fragt ihm, was ist bei dir mit dem Beharzecha, schreit uns b'man nafshoi, was mir Ratzon, was mir Tainug, was mir Ava, was mir Yira. When a person knows that time is limited and he has to stand guard on his post, not even 1 minute should be wasted, that he shouldn't be doing his shliches. So then, wo soll gehen trachten wegen Madriges? Der Kol kachu torod lochet v'shakua, verjagt, verengt und vertrunken, bimili shlichusei, asheini chishuv klal, oidis madrigosei. So this represents Reb Yoel Kahn. In other words, sich nicht Eikev nach ציור. Who is he? Just someone who's carrying out hafotzas hamayonis chutza. That's it. It comes before everything else. To do what the Rebbe wants. That's it. Now it's a very high level, but this is what we're supposed to be aiming for. And this is what it means to be truly a chassid of the Rebbe. Now, when I mean to say over here that Reb Yoel Aryingeschtelt Tzir, he knew how to make a bacher feel comfortable. He was one of the boys. In a way, he was like a bacher. I'll just give you one example. When he was sitting Shiva after his father, I went to be Menachem Oval. So I walk into his house, and he's leaning on the couch and forward. And in front of him, there's Choshev Rabbonim coming to Menachem Oval. Mamish Choshev, important people, Choshev Rabbonim. And he's leaning in, and he's talking to them. Anyways, mitamol, while he's talking to them, glat, he leans onto the couch with his whole body, what do you call it? Horizontal position. So anybody else who would be like self-conscious about how does it look, is it bakovidik or it's not bakovidik, and the Rabbonim wouldn't do such a thing. But a person was trachnish wegen sich klal. He has no image to protect. He's not thinking, does it look good, doesn't it look good? He felt like relaxing a bit. He just did it. Das ist Chassidus Yid. He's totally authentic. He's totally emes. And that's why he was the most effective in his ashpah. The Rebbe brings many times in English and also in Chassidus before in the Frierdiker Rebbe. There's the famous quote, Van emes werden alle bottle. Before truth, all become nullified. And Yale represents the truth. There's not an agenda. There's not any politics. There's no positions. There's no opinions. Es nicht kein Parteimensch. He's Chassidus b'tarasa. By the way, I heard an expression once from Jonathan Sacks that I like very much. Jonathan Sacks said, it was once said about a great religious leader, he was a man who took God so seriously that he never felt the need to take himself seriously at all. That's Reb Yoel. He takes the Rebbe seriously, takes the Likus seriously. So he's going to take himself seriously. What it means to say, he doesn't take himself seriously. Wer bin ich? I have to work on myself. Was mehr as my seichel, as long as I'm bestiert to the kavanah. That's what I have to do. In this Zoom that they made for the Shiva, Rabbi Shalom Charatonov said 3 things. And I'm going to repeat 2 of the things that he said that bring out this idea of the Bitul of Reb Yoel. One thing he said was that one day Reb Yoel was learning Lekut Lev Yitzchak, and he told Reb Shalom that he's forgetting some pratim, so therefore he wants to learn again all of the Sifrei Lekut Lev Yitzchak, all of the Sfarim of the Rebbe's father. And this is the connection of our talk today with Chaf, which I don't know if I mentioned before. Chaf was the Yom Elul of the Rebbe's father, Harav HaKodesh, Rebbe Levi Yitzchak Shneerson, who was an unbelievable goyin in Nigle and in Pnimius HaTorah and Kabbalah, and who had tremendous Mesiras Nefesh for Yiddishkeit. So Reb Yoel, who was the editor of the Sefer Erechem, the Encyclopedia of Chassidus Chabad, so when the Svarim of the Rebbe's father came out, he started learning it in depth, just like he would learn Lekut Torah or Tanya or Samarvov or any other Sefer in Chassidus. He learned the Rebbe's father's Svarim. But why did he learn the Rebbe's father's Svarim? Because of his kashrus. Because he's totally bottled to the Rebbe, and he knows that to the Rebbe these Svarim are very important and dear and the most precious thing. So therefore now he also has to learn the Svarim. So Reb Shalom thought to himself that when Reb Yoel was looking again at Lekut Lev Yitzchak, he thought maybe he's just touching up a bit, and maybe the reason why he learned Lekut Lev Yitzchak in the first place was because there was some entries, subjects that are discussed primarily in Lekut Lev Yitzchak, like Oisius, the letters of the Aleph base. But now he saw the way Reb Yoel was once again learning through all the Svarim, because he said he was forgetting some details. So Shalom was bringing out, look at Reb Yoel. His way of thinking is more traditional, mainstream Chabad Chassidus, which is Tanya, Lekut Torah, Samarvov, Ayin Beis, Lekut Sichos, the Svarim that Reb Yoel gives a share. And over here, he's taking upon himself, getting involved in a totally new sort of limud, and only because of his kashrus to the Rebbe. That was one example. One thing that Reb Shalom said. The second thing that Reb Shalom said is even more astonishing. He said that they were once trying to get to the pshat of a piece of Zohar. Pashat, they wanted to get to the Pirush HaMilas, to understand what the Zohar is saying over here in a certain place. And Reb Shalom suggested to Reb Yoel to go look in a certain sefer, which that sefer is not really accepted by Chassidus. But just to give a look over there to see how that sefer learns pshat in the Zohar. So Reb Yoel said, no, he doesn't want to look at a sefer which is not accepted by Chassidus. And Reb Yoel said, as bei em soll sich nicht ablegen a Worten Kopf, was ist nicht ausgehalten an Chassidus. He doesn't want anything implanted in his brain that is not in accordance with Chassidus. So Reb Shalom brings out the valid point. Look at Reb Yoel. He's the one with the greatest head. He's the one who's completely saturated with Chassidus Chabad. He, in a way, is the authority of Chassidus Chabad. He's the one that Rebbe made in charge to write the encyclopedia of Chassidus Chabad. And he's worried that something might affect his hashkafa, his perspective, his look. If anybody doesn't have to worry, If there's anybody in the world who doesn't have to worry about looking into another sefer because it might compromise his perspective, it's Reb Yoel Kahn. He's the most saturated, the most completely one with Teiras Chassidus from all Chassidim. And no, he says he doesn't want to look at it. Aber soll sich nicht ablegen ein Wort in Kopf, was es nicht ausgehalten hat bei Chassidus. He doesn't want anything entering his brain space. That's not in accordance with Chassidus. So this is what Reb Shalom says, this is a Yiras Sho'myim. This is what it means to be Chassidus b'tarasa. He's the complete vehicle. He makes himself completely transparent in a way, only to Chassidus Chabad. There's nothing else. And then he's a pure vehicle, and the right vehicle, and the right receptacle, an instrument for Chassidus, for Likus, and for the Rebbe. I'd like to finish off with a story that I probably mentioned before. And Reb Yoel said this story by a Fabrengen once. And this story completely blew me away. I couldn't get over it. It's a story from L'Shema Eisen. There's another similar story in another place in L'Shema Eisen, but Reb Yoel didn't say that story. He said the following story. I'm going to read it inside. This is in L'Shema Eisen, Omad Lamed Ches. It's under the section of the Alter Rebbe. There's another story under the section of Isaac Hummeler, which is a similar story. But I'm just going to read you this story. Reb Eisel fleck zu der Elter sich sehr mashma sein. When he was older, he would just belittle himself. He had self-effacement. Einmal hat sich zerrät, als hat gar nicht mit was zu gehen auf jenem Elam. Once he expressed that he has nothing with what to go lemaila with. One thing he has. Shimush Talmidei Chachamim. He served Talmidei Chachamim. He served the Talmud Chacham. As a given azam ma'aser, it once happened, such a story, and this is a Bible saying. As gegangen zoomen in Gassen Liozna, he was once walking along the street in Lozna in the summer, and the Alter Rebbe is gesessen im Fenster, and the Alter Rebbe was sitting by a window. Hat bloß getan a wind came and blew, es geflogen a blättel von die Ksoven. From what the Alter Rebbe was looking at, from what the Alter Rebbe was learning, from the writings, a wind came and blew away a piece of writing. Hat aufgeheben und zugetragen dem Rebbe. So Reb Eisel was there, walking along. He picked up this manuscript, this writing, and he brought it back to the Alter Rebbe. And in other words, Reb Eisel was saying, with them, now with this, he could pass on from this world. With this, he's going to Sho'myim. When Reb Eisel said that, somebody smiled. Like, really? Like, they found it incredulous. Sagt Reb Eisel, was lachst du? So Reb Eisel said, why are you laughing? Es ist alpidin emes shimush Talmidei Chachamim. This is called true shimush to Talmidei Chachamim. So Reb Yoel said this ma'aser by a Fabrengen. In all seriousness, so you can imagine, we're 20-year-olds. And here, Reb Yoel is sitting and saying that Reb Isaac Hummeler, who is like a tzaddik, an unbelievable, awesome Yid, Goyen, you name it. And mit was geht lemaila? With what is he going lemaila? Because he picked up a blättel and gave it to the Alter Rebbe. So in other words, how do you define your life? Your life is defined by how much you're involved in serving the Rebbe. And Reb Yoel, if I remember correctly, by that Fabrengen, kept on saying, the question you have to ask in life is, what sort of active role will I have in the Rebbe's work? So, now let's get back to the lesson. Practically, since we all are meant to be Hafotzas HaMayonis Chutza machines, Soldaten von Hafotzas HaMayonis Chutza, as the Rebbe said by the Farbrengen, the first official Farbrengen of Yud Aleph Shvat, Tovshin Yud Aleph, that the pnimius of every single shlichus is afotzas hamayonis chutza. So now we have to go back, just like it says Mahu Racham Afata Racham. We have to think about this letter of the Rebbe where he says, just like Hashem, his words are effective, and it's dependent on you, by you having Yiras Sho'myim, and by you having Dvarim HaYetzim in our life. And the main point is by you being an emissative person, and nicht sich hereinstellen that tzir as much as you can. Basically, Zaina Bitul defied, which means to have true humility. L'chaim, we should all work on our humility, our Bitul Hayesh. And the more we'll work on our humility, the more we will have atzloche in the Aveda of Afotzas Hamayonis Chutza, was mer a piate, to be all the more of a heel, that our pnimius hanefesh should be able to express itself and to have more atzloche in the Aveda of Afotzas Hamayonis Chutza, which will cause the Ka'osi Mar Dom Al Kameshicha Bimheire V'Yameinu Mamish. Posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.